My name is Stephen McKinney Whitaker, and last December I met with my friend Imam Kamil Mufti in the wake of a news story that came out in Peoria. Someone had in their front lawn a display of wood cutouts of men kneeling in turbans and soldiers standing behind them with rifles aimed at the back of their head. We spoke together about what we could do to better educate the community about Islam and build bridges within the community, and most importantly, build relationships. And so Peace for Peoria was created, building on already existing relationships between imams, rabbis, and pastors. We invited the community to a tour of the mosque and a series of speakers to help the community better understand Islam and to take away some of the mystery that seems to surround Islam and Muslims for so many. When we remain in the dark, it's easier to give in to fear. At that first event, about 700 people came and stayed for dinner. It was an energizing evening that broke down walls and united much of the community, many of whom had never been to a mosque or had a conversation with a Muslim before. Diverse speakers talked about the dangers of otherization and scapegoating, and the need for relationship building and understanding, and also for calling out hate and prejudice when it is encountered so it doesn't become normalized. But honestly, the event felt like a bit of a pep rally, with lots of cheering and energy when we proclaimed things everyone there already pretty much believed. While that was needed, it wasn't enough. From comments on the news stories about the event and social media, I made the mistake and broke the rule of reading the comments. It was clear there was more work to be done. There was still fear and misunderstanding, but what struck me most was the certainty people had about Islam. A certainty that said Islam was our enemy and Muslims just wanted to kill Americans. There was such ferocious certainty of the dangers of Islam and its incompatibility with American values, despite minimal knowledge or experience of actual Muslims. So the Presbyterian churches in the Peoria area quickly worked to put on a second event. We planned a town hall Q&A in the Peoria Civic Center, featuring a panel that would answer questions featuring a Catholic, a progressive evangelical, a more conservative evangelical, a rabbi, and an imam. Before we got into the Q&A, we heard short addresses by key leaders in our community, including the mayor, the CEO of Caterpillar, the presidents of 2 major hospital groups, and the president of Bradley University. They spoke about how there was no place for prejudice in Peoria and how their companies and communities thrived and were successful because of diversity, not in spite of it. Over 1,000 people attended the event, and we answered questions from the community like how each of our faiths deal with our own violent pasts and with texts that seem to promote or command violence or exclusion. We dealt with whether we all believed we worshiped the same God and if that even mattered. We addressed the question of whether Muslims can be good Americans or if Muslims had to advocate for Sharia law and what that means. It was a powerful evening that concluded with participants gathering together for refreshments and conversation. Relationships were made and strengthened. Testimonials of further interactions between people of different faiths began to pour in, but we knew we couldn't stop there. Peace is not that easy. There were more stories to be told, lessons learned, relationships built, and complicity in systems of oppression and othering that we needed to own up to. So we approached the New York Times bestselling author Jim Henderson, the author of Jim and Casper Go to Church, about telling our story. Because we believed if peace could play in Peoria, it could play anywhere in the U.S. And so the next phase of our journey began, the No Joke Project.
There were certain narratives that I had come to believe about Islam, and because I didn't know a Muslim, there was this sense of nervousness when it came to Camille, because Muslims were so otherized in my mind.
Islam is taken to be a religion of terror, a religion of hate, and it has history. If religion is misused, it can be a force for war and evil and hatred. I mean, there's no question about that. But to be fair, it can also be a force of good, love, and peace, harmony, and understanding as well.
Relationship first, and coming together, seeing the humanity of the other, and then dealing with difference. I think it's a model that can work in all sorts of places.
There's just so much that we have to learn and discover that we would just never know if we only go to the circles that we already go to get our information. And at some point, we have to step out.
You can see the full trailer at nojokeproject.com, but the documentary shares stories, helpful ones, shameful ones, painful ones, challenging ones, loving ones, but ultimately stories of friendship, unity, and love. Peace for Peoria demonstrates what communities can do when we take the time to reach out to one another and build relationships and to listen. That's what Peace for Peoria is all about, listening to build relationships. We believe that listening is so close to loving that you can hardly tell the difference. To be loved is to be heard. We can't be in relationship with one another, a true equitable relationship, until all parties feel heard. To that end, the documentary is based around 3 principles to help us in our relationships of difference to really listen. The first is, I will be unusually interested in the other. Tell me your story. Tell me where you're coming from. 2, I will stay in the room with difference. When things get a little heated, we're not just going to walk away and say, we're too different. And the third is, I won't compare my best with your worst. We've begun to use these practices, and they do take practice to build relationships with difference. Religious difference, racial difference, political difference, theological difference, and the list goes on. We just finished a class on Islam with Imam Mufti with 40 clergy members in the Peoria area. It was a time to listen, ask questions, find points of commonality, and also be honest about difference. There were times of laughter and unity, but also some tense, challenging times of clear difference. But the practices kept us in the room and kept us listening to each other. These 3 practices help guide us in our relationships and conversations with one another. They help us demonstrate genuine love. Love casts out fear, and it makes room for peace. Peace for Peoria, peace for your town, peace for our country, peace for our world. It starts with relationships, and relationships start with listening, and listening begins with love. Thank you.